In the farthest reaches of known space, beyond trade routes, beyond war zones, beyond even the forgotten ruins of dead civilizations, there existed a place no empire claimed. Not because they couldn't, but because they wouldn't. Ancient star charts marked it with the same symbol across thousands of species, a circle carved with jagged lines, surrounded by warnings written in dying languages. Do not approach. At the center of that forbidden region drifted a starless world. No sun lit its surface. No orbit bound it. It simply existed, suspended in a void where even light seemed reluctant to travel. They called it the Black World. Every civilization had a story about it. Some said it was the grave of a forgotten god. Others claimed it was a prison, one that should never be opened. But all stories ended the same way. There was a throne. And it was not empty. King Veilzorin stood at the viewing chamber of his worship, staring into the endless dark where the Black World loomed. His reflection shimmered faintly across the transparent alloy glass, tall, armored, crowned in bone and black crystal. Each fragment of his crown came from a conquered species, a reminder of his victories. He had broken empires. He had silenced entire star systems. Fear followed his name across the galaxy like a shadow. And now, he had come for the one thing no king had ever claimed. Behind him, the command deck was unusually quiet. Even the most battle-hardened officers avoided looking directly at the planet below. "My king," one of them finally said, his voice tight with unease, "we are within scanning range." Veilzorin didn't turn. "Report." The officer swallowed. "There are no detectable cities. No energy grids. No life forms." The pause. "Nothing?" the king asked. "Nothing, except one anomaly." That made him smile. "Show me." The central display flickered to life. At first, it appeared empty, just a vast, black wasteland stretching endlessly across the planet's surface. But then the system highlighted a single point. One structure. One object. Centered perfectly, as if the entire world existed only to hold it. A throne. Veilzorin leaned forward slightly. "What is it made of?" "We don't know," another officer answered quickly. "Scanners can't classify it. It doesn't match any known material, organic, metallic, or otherwise. Energy signature? Minimal. Almost dormant." The king's eyes narrowed. Dormant. As if it were waiting. A low murmur spread across the crew. "My lord," the first officer said again, more urgently now, "this matches the ancient warnings. The ones recovered from the precursor ruins. They all mention a throne. That must never be claimed," Veilzorin finished calmly. He turned at last, his gaze cutting through the room. "And yet it still exists." No one answered. Because they all knew what that meant. No one had dared to take it. Until now. The dissent was silent. No resistance. No defense systems. No sign that anything on the Black World even noticed their arrival. That, more than anything, unsettled them. Veilzorin stepped off the landing craft first. The ground beneath his boots gave a strange, brittle crunch, like ash or old bone ground into dust. He looked up. The sky above was not truly a sky. It was a void, stretching endlessly, swallowing all light. There were no stars. No distant galaxies. Just black. As if the planet existed outside reality itself. Behind him, his soldiers formed ranks, weapons raised. "Advance," he ordered. They moved toward the throne. It stood alone on a vast plain, visible from miles away. Tall, jagged, carved from something that seemed to shift when observed too closely. The closer they got, the heavier the air became. Breathing felt wrong. One soldier stumbled. "My king," he rasped, clutching his chest. "Some things." He collapsed. No wound. No attack. Just dead. The formation faltered. "What happened?" Another soldier whispered. "No external trauma detected," the medic replied, scanning frantically. "Vitals just ceased." Veilzorin didn't slow. "Leave him," he said. The others hesitated, but obeyed. They continued forward. Another soldier dropped. Then another. Each death was silent. Instant. Unexplainable. Fear began to spread. "My king, we should retreat," one of the officers urged. Veilzorin stopped. He turned slightly, his voice cold. "You may." None of them moved, because leaving meant admitting fear. And fear, in his empire, was punishable by death. So they followed, even as more of them fell. At last, Veilzorin stood before the throne. Close, it was worse. The surface wasn't solid. It moved, subtly, like something alive beneath a thin layer of reality. Strange symbols crawled across it, shifting and rearranging whenever he tried to focus on them. The pulsed, faintly, like a heartbeat. The sound echoed in his mind, not through his ears. Inside him, a whisper followed, so soft it barely existed. "You are not the first." Veilzorin's lips curled into a smile. "Of course not," he said quietly. "But I will be the last." Behind him, only a handful of soldiers remained. The rest lay scattered across the blackened ground, lifeless. Watching, or perhaps being watched. The king reached out. For a moment, even he hesitated. Then his hand touched the throne. It was warm, alive, waiting, without another thought. He sat. The universe reacted. Not slowly, not subtly, instantly. Across distant galaxies, ancient machines awakened. Sealed vaults cracked open. Long-dead worlds trembled. Something noticed. On the black world, the ground split open beneath the throne, thin fractures spreading outward like veins of light. The heartbeat stopped. Total silence fell. And far below, something stirred. Not a creature. Not a mind. Something older. Something that had been waiting. For a very long time. To be disturbed. And as Veilzorin settled into the throne, believing himself victorious, he did not realize he had just made the first mistake. For a single, glorious moment, Veilzorin believed he had won. Power surged through him like a living storm. Not the kind drawn from weapons or conquered worlds, but something deeper. Something absolute. It flooded his veins, his mind, his very existence. He felt it spreading outward, touching distant stars, brushing against the edges of galaxies. He could feel them. Every system. Every species. Every fear. A laugh tore from his throat, echoing across the dead world. "I have claimed it," he declared, his voice carrying far beyond the reach of sound. The surviving soldiers behind him dropped to their knees. Not in loyalty, but because they could no longer stand. The pressure had become unbearable. The air itself felt thick, crushing, like reality was folding inward around the throne. Veilzorin barely noticed. He was above it, beyond it. "I am the ruler of all things," he said, rising slightly in the seat, his crown blazing with unnatural light. "The throne has chosen me." For a heartbeat, it felt true. The power stopped. Not faded. Not weakened. Stopped. As if something had cut it off completely. The sudden emptiness hit harder than any force. Veilzorin gasped. "What?" The throne beneath him pulsed once. Thump. The sound wasn't heard. It was felt. Every soldier screamed. Several collapsed instantly, their bodies going still as their minds shattered under something unseen. Veilzorin gripped the armrests. "What is this?" he snarled. "What have you done?" The symbols on the throne ignited. Not with light, but with presence. They crawled faster now, shifting violently, rearranging into patterns that hurt to look at. The air around the throne distorted. Slowed. Then warped. Then broke. A voice returned. Not a whisper anymore. Not soft. Not distant. It spoke with weight. With age. With something that did not belong to this universe. "You are unworthy." The word struck him like a physical blow. Veilzorin roared, forcing himself upright. "I am king of the Ashen Dominion. I have conquered 12 empires, shattered. You have taken." The throne pulsed again. Thump. The sky above them cracked. Not metaphorically. Not symbolically. Cracked. A thin line split the endless black, like glass under pressure. From that fracture, a faint, sickly light leaked through, wrong in color, wrong in shape, wrong in meaning. Veilzorin's voice faltered. "You will obey me," he hissed. I have claimed you. You have touched, the voice corrected. Another pulse. Thump. The crack widened. Something moved behind it. Something vast. Something that did not fit. The remaining soldiers began to panic. My king, something is coming. We need to retreat. It's not stable, this place isn't. Their words cut off one by one. Not because they stopped speaking. Because something took them. Shadows spilled from the fracture in the sky, long twisting shapes that moved like liquid but struck like blades. They slithered across the ground, faster than thought, wrapping around bodies. And pulling. One soldier screamed as he was dragged upward, his form stretching unnaturally before vanishing into the crack. Another fired wildly. The shots passed through the shadows as if they weren't there. Then the shadows wrapped around him too. Gone. 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 Velzorin tried to stand. He couldn't. The throne held him in place. What is this? He demanded, panic finally breaking through his voice. Release me. The symbols burned brighter. You are not the first to sit. The words echoed, layered, as if many voices spoke at once. Velzorin's breathing grew sharp. Then where are they? The others? Silence. Below. The ground trembled. Cracks spread outward from the throne, glowing faintly with the same shifting symbols. Velzorin felt it then. Not just power. Not just presence. But something beneath. Something buried. Something that had been waiting. What is this place? He whispered. The answer came slowly. Deliberately. A lock. The sky split wider. The crack became a wound. And from that wound, something began to push through. Not fully. Not yet. But enough. A shape. Too large to comprehend. Too wrong to describe. Its edges bent reality. Its presence distorted thought. Simply looking at it made Velzorin's vision blur, his mind struggling to process something that did not follow any law of existence. He tried to look away. He couldn't. The throne forced him to witness. No, he breathed. No, this isn't possible. It is contained, the voice said. The pause. Until it is not. The shadows surged again, consuming the last of his soldiers. Silence returned. Only Velzorin remained. Alone. Trapped. Watching. The thing behind the sky pressed closer. The crack widened further. And then, footsteps. So, measured. Out of place. Velzorin's eyes snapped downward. Something was walking across the black plain. Not running. Not fleeing. Walking. Toward him. Toward the throne. Toward the breaking sky. Toward that thing. The figure was small. Insignificant. Wrong. Because it wasn't afraid. As it drew closer, the shape became clearer. 2 arms. 2 legs. No armor. No weapons. No visible power. A human. Velzorin's voice shook. No, that's not. The human didn't look at the sky. Didn't look at the shadows. Didn't look at the impossible thing trying to enter reality. He looked only at the throne. And the king sitting on it. You shouldn't have done that, the human said calmly. Velzorin snarled, though fear twisted his voice. Stay back. Whatever this is, it belongs to me. The human stopped a few steps away. For a moment, he said nothing. It never did. The throne pulsed. Slow. Heavy. Thump. The sky paused its tearing. The shadows froze. Even the thing beyond the cracks seemed to hesitate, as if something more important had just arrived. Velzorin stared. What are you? He demanded. The human met his gaze. And for the first time, there was something in his eyes. Something ancient. Something endless. Something that had seen this before. I told you, the human said quietly. You shouldn't have sat there. And somewhere deep beneath the throne, something else began to wake. The shadows froze. Not vanished. Not retreated. Frozen, mid-motion, mid-strike, suspended like fragments of a broken moment. Even the tear in the sky seemed to hesitate, its jagged edges no longer spreading. Everything waited. For him. The human stepped closer. His boots made no sound on the blackened ground. No ash shifted. No dust rose. It was as if the world itself refused to acknowledge his weight. Veil Zorin felt it instantly. The pressure. Not crushing like before, but focused. The throne that had bound him, tormented him, now grew still, almost quiet. Listening. Watching. Stay back, Veil Zorin snarled, though his voice betrayed him. You don't understand what you're interfering with. The human didn't stop. You're right, he said calmly. I understand exactly what this is. He reached the base of the throne. Up close, he seemed even less impressive. No armor, no weapon, no crown. Just a simple figure standing before a king who had conquered half the galaxy. And yet, Veil Zorin felt smaller. Who are you? The alien king demanded. The human tilted his head slightly, as if considering the question. I've had many names, he said. That's not an answer. No, the human agreed. It's not. He looked up at the throne. The shifting symbols slowed. For the first time since Veil Zorin had arrived, they held their shape, forming patterns that felt familiar, recognizable. To the human. I was the first, he said quietly. Veil Zorin narrowed his eyes. The first what? The human's gaze drifted upward, to the cracked sky, to the thing pressing against the wound in reality. Then back to the throne. The first king. The word struck harder than the throne's voice ever had. Veil Zorin laughed, but it came out strained. Impossible. Your kind barely crawled out of its own world when my empire was already ancient. The human didn't argue. Didn't react. Time doesn't move the same here, he said instead. The pause. Or there. He glanced briefly at the crack in the sky. Something behind it shifted. Not closer, but aware. Veil Zorin's grip tightened on the throne. If you were king, then where is your empire? The human's expression didn't change. Gone. Destroyed. Veil Zorin pressed. Ended, the human corrected. By what? Silence. For a moment, even the throne seemed to wait for the answer. By what the throne holds back. The air grew colder. Veil Zorin felt something crawl across his mind, an understanding he didn't want, didn't need, didn't survive. This, he whispered, glancing at the sky, this thing isn't a thing, the human said. It's what's left. Veil Zorin's breath hitched. Left of what? The human looked at him. For the first time, there was something in his eyes beyond calm. Something heavy. Everything that came before us. The throne pulsed faintly. Not violently. Not painfully. Almost in agreement. Veil Zorin struggled again. The invisible force holding him to the throne resisted, but it had weakened. You're lying, he said, desperation creeping into his voice. If this throne is so important, why leave it unguarded? Why let anyone find it? The human stepped closer. Because it doesn't need guards. He placed a hand lightly on the edge of the throne. The symbols flared, but not in rejection. In recognition. It chooses, the human said. Veil Zorin's voice cracked. It chose me. The human shook his head. No. The pause. It tested you. Above them, the crack in the sky shuddered. The thing beyond it pressed harder now, its form pushing against reality like something trying to remember how to exist. The shadows trembled, still frozen but straining. And you failed. Veil Zorin roared, rage flaring over fear. I have not failed. I claimed it. I sat on it. The throne pulsed. Thump. His words cut off. His body locked. The human's gaze didn't waver. You took, he said quietly. You conquered. You ruled. Each word landed like a verdict. But you never protected. Veil Zorin stared at him. What? The human leaned slightly closer. This throne isn't a reward. The heartbeat grew louder. Slower. Heavier. It's a responsibility. The ground beneath them began to crack again. But this time, Veil Zorin could see it. Not just fractures. Layers. Deep beneath the surface of the black world, something vast lay buried, stretching far beyond the horizon, beyond the planet itself. Structures. Ancient. Impossible. And at the center of it all, the throne. Not resting on the planet. Anchoring it. What is this place? Zorin whispered, his voice hollow. The human didn't look down. He didn't need to. It's not a world, he said. Another pulse. Thump. It's a seal. Zorin's mind reeled. A seal for what? The human's eyes flicked once more to the sky. The crack widened slightly. Enough for something to move. Something that did not belong. You've already seen it, he said. The shadows began to move again. Slowly. Not attacking. Circling. Waiting. The thing behind the sky shifted closer, its presence pressing against reality with increasing force. Zorin felt it in his bones now. In his thoughts. In the spaces between them. It wasn't just outside. It was leaking in. You can stop this, he said suddenly, his voice desperate now. You know what this is. You've done this before. Fix it. The human looked at him. For a long moment he said nothing. I never fixed it, he said quietly. I held it. Zorin's eyes widened. Then do it again. The human's gaze shifted to the throne. The symbols pulsed softly. Waiting. Someone has to sit, he said. The pause. And it can't be you. The throne released Zorin. Without warning. Without resistance. He fell forward, crashing onto the blackened ground, gasping for air that suddenly felt thin and sharp. The pressure lifted from his body. But not from his mind. No, he whispered, scrambling backward. No, no, no. The human stepped forward. Past him. Toward the throne. Zorin reached out. Wait, if you sit there. I know, the human said. He placed a hand on the throne. The symbols flared brightly. Alive. Recognizing. Welcoming. Zorin's voice broke. What happens if you don't? The human paused. Just for a moment. Then he answered. Then everything ends. The sky split wider. The thing beyond pushed through further. Reality bent. Screamed. Began to break. And the human stepped forward. Ready to sit. As the universe held its breath. The moment before he sat, everything trembled. Not just the ground. Not just the sky. Everything. Stars far beyond the black world flickered. Entire systems dimmed, as if the universe itself was holding its breath, afraid of what came next. Zorin lay on the fractured ground, his body shaking, his mind unraveling. Stop, he whispered. But his voice meant nothing here. Nothing ever had. The human stood before the throne, his hand resting lightly on its shifting surface. The symbols no longer writhed. They had stilled. For him, they formed patterns now, ancient, precise, deliberate. Not random chaos, but a language older than stars, older than memory. Zorin forced himself to look. And immediately wished he hadn't. The symbols didn't just exist. They explained. For a fraction of a second he understood them. And in that moment he saw a universe before this one. A reality that did not obey laws. A time when existence itself was unstable. He screamed. The knowledge vanished, ripped from his mind like a mercy. The human didn't react. You're seeing too much, he said quietly. Zorin coughed, dragging himself backward. What is this? What are you showing me? The human didn't turn. It's not showing you, he replied. It's remembering. Above them, the sky tore wider. The crack had become a wound, jagged, raw, bleeding, something that wasn't light and wasn't darkness. Something else. Something wrong. From within it, the thing pressed forward. Not fully formed. Not fully real. But enough. Its presence bent the air, twisted the horizon, fractured perception itself. Looking at it was like trying to remember a nightmare that never ended. Zorin clawed at his own face, desperate to look away. What is that? He screamed. The human answered calmly. It's what's left when a universe dies. The words fell like stones. Zorin's breath caught. That's impossible. Universes don't just. They do, the human interrupted. The pause. Sometimes they're killed. The ground split open beneath the throne. Not violently. Not suddenly. But with purpose. Deep cracks spread outward, revealing something far below. Not molten core, not rock, but structure. Endless. layer upon layer. A network of impossible geometry stretching far beneath the surface, glowing faintly with the same symbols carved into the throne. Veilzorin stared. This isn't a planet. No, the human said. It never was. The cracks widened. And for the first time, Veilzorin could see it clearly. The black world wasn't a world. It was a shell. A casing. A cover built over something far, far larger. What is it? He whispered. The human finally turned his head slightly. A lock. The heartbeat returned. Slow, heavy, thump. Each pulse rippled through the cracks, through the sky, through reality itself. Thump. Veilzorin felt it in his chest now. Matching his own. Or replacing it. Locked? What? He forced out. The human looked up at the wound in the sky. At the thing pushing through. At what came before us, he said. Veilzorin's mind raced, trying to grasp it. You're saying that thing is older than the universe? Yes. And this throne, this place, is holding it back? Yes. Then why leave it unguarded? Veilzorin demanded, his voice cracking. Why let anyone come here? Why let me sit on it? The human's gaze returned to the throne. Because it doesn't need guards, he said. It needs a keeper. The shadows around them began to move again. Not attacking. Not hunting. Gathering. They circled the throne slowly, like something ancient recognizing a ritual about to begin. The thing in the sky pushed further through the wound. A shape began to form. Limbs that weren't limbs. A head that wasn't a head. A presence that rewrote the meaning of existence just by being seen. Veilzorin screamed again. Make it stop. You said you've done this before, so do it. The human remained still. I did, he said. Once. Then why did you leave? Veilzorin demanded. The human was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. He died. Veilzorin blinked. What? The one who sat here before you, the human said. Before me. The pause. He died holding it. The throne pulsed. Thump. And then? Veilzorin whispered. The human looked down at his hand resting on the throne. And then I took his place. The realization hit Veilzorin like a blade. This isn't power, he said slowly. No, the human agreed. This is a prison. Another pulse. Thump. For them, the human said. And for whoever sits here. The cracks beneath the throne widened further. The structure below pulsed with growing intensity, the symbols glowing brighter, faster, reacting to something approaching a breaking point. The sky screamed. Not metaphorically. It screamed. The wound tore wider as the thing forced more of itself into reality. Veilzorin felt it in his thoughts now, whispers that weren't words, promises that weren't meant to be understood. It saw him. It knew him. It wanted everything. You can't hold that forever, Veilzorin said, his voice shaking. No one can. The human didn't deny it. I know. Then why? Veilzorin demanded. Why would you do this again? The human finally turned fully toward him. For the first time, there was emotion in his eyes. Not fear. Not anger. Something quieter. Something heavier. Because someone has to. The throne pulsed again. Thump. The symbols flared brightly. The shadows stilled. The sky paused its tearing. Everything aligned. Everything waited. The human turned back to the throne. This is where it always ends, he said softly. Veilzorin shook his head, backing away. No, there has to be another way. There isn't. The human stepped forward. The air grew still. The universe leaned closer. And this, he said, placing both hands on the throne, is where it begins again. Behind him, the thing in the sky lunged forward. Reality shattered, and the human sat. The moment he sat, reality broke. Not in sound, not in light, but in meaning. Everything that was bent. Veilzorin screamed. The sky above shattered completely, the wound ripping open into something vast and impossible. The thing beyond it surged forward, its presence spilling into existence like a flood that had been held back for too long. It did not move like a creature. It did not think like a mind. It simply was. And that was enough to destroy everything. Stars in distant systems flickered out like dying embers. Entire fleets far beyond the black world froze as their instruments failed, their crews collapsing under a pressure they could not understand. The universe itself was coming undone. And at the center of it all, the humans sat on the throne. The symbols erupted. Blinding. Violent. Alive. They surged across the throne, down its legs, into the cracks below, spreading through the vast structure hidden beneath the black world. The heartbeat returned. Louder than ever. Slower. Heavier. Thump. The sound echoed across existence. The thing in the sky faltered. Just for a moment. Veilzorin crawled backward, his hands clawing at the blackened ground. No, you can't stop that, he gasped. It's too big too. The human didn't respond. His eyes were closed. His hands gripped the throne. And something began to change. The symbols weren't just glowing anymore. They were flowing. Moving across his body, his arms, his chest, burning into him, not as pain, but as something deeper. Recognition. Acceptance. Burden. The throne was no longer rejecting. It was binding. The thing beyond the sky pushed harder. A limb, if it could be called that, forced its way through the wound. It twisted, folding space around it, rewriting the shape of reality just by existing. Veilzorin felt his mind fracture again. Visions flooded him. Worlds consumed. Stars devoured. Time collapsing inward like a dying breath. This is the end, he whispered. The human spoke. Softly. Calmly. No. The heartbeat struck again. Thump. The cracks in the ground flared with light. The structure beneath awakened fully now, every layer, every line, every impossible angle aligning with the throne. The black world shifted. Not physically. Conceptually. It was no longer just a place. It was a function. A lock. A barrier. A line. The human opened his eyes. They were no longer human. Not glowing. Not monstrous. But deep. Endless. Like looking into something that had no bottom. I held it once, he said quietly. And I will hold it again. The thing in the sky screamed. This time, Veilzorin heard it. Not with his ears. With everything. It was not a sound. It was a contradiction. A force that should not be denied. And yet, it was being pushed back. The symbols surged brighter. The throne pulsed harder. The cracks began to close. Not the ones in the ground. The ones in the sky. No, that's impossible, Veilzorin whispered, staring upward. The wound in reality resisted. Fought. Struggled. But it was closing. Slowly. Painfully. Inevitably. The human's grip tightened. For the first time, he flinched. Not from fear. From strain. The weight of what he held pressed down on him. Not just physically, but across every layer of his existence. Time bent around him. Memories fractured. He was no longer just sitting on the throne. He was becoming part of it. Veilzorin watched in horror. You're dying, he said. The human didn't deny it. Not yet. Another pulse. Thump. The thing beyond the sky recoiled. Pulled back. Forced out. Its shape twisted violently, resisting the closing seal, its presence tearing at the edges of existence. But it was losing. Why you? Veilzorin asked, his voice hollow. Why only humans? The human didn't look at him. His gaze remained fixed on the closing sky. For a long moment he said nothing. Because we were the first to say no. The words settled into the silence like truth. Not pride. Not arrogance. Just fact. When it came before, the human continued, his voice quieter now, everything else broke. Another pulse. Thump. We didn't. The wound shrank. The shadows dissolved. The thing beyond the sky screamed again. And vanished. The sky sealed. Completely. As if it had never been broken. Silence fell. True silence. The kind that existed before sound. Veilzorin lay still. Unable to move. Unable to think. Alive only because something had allowed it. Slowly he lifted his gaze. The throne remained. The human remained. But he was different. Still unmoving. Part of the throne now. Not bound. Integrated. The symbols dimmed. The heartbeat slowed. Veilzorin whispered, "Is it over?" The human didn't answer. Not immediately. For now. Far across the galaxy, signals began to return. Fleets regained control. Stars stabilized. Sensors recalibrated. And across countless civilizations, one message spread faster than light itself. The throne is occupied. Veilzorin forced himself to his feet. He looked at the human one last time. "You'll sit there forever," he said. It wasn't a question. The human's eyes remained fixed forward, watching something no one else could see. "Until someone else comes," he said quietly. Veilzorin turned. And for the first time in his life, he ran. Behind him, the black world returned to stillness. Silent. Waiting. Enduring. And on the throne, the human king remained, holding the line between existence and what waited beyond it.